Things are going to be a bit dicey in week number 7 for daily fantasy football with very few high totals on this slate. And our job for today is to identify where we want to go after considering how potentially low scoring this slate could be. And I think there are ways to play things, but it's going to require some thought and some digging in for sure. We're going to dive in, break down week 7's main slate, and get you ready for Sunday over on FanDuel. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. You can check out Brandon on Twitter at Gdula13. He is a senior managing editor for FanDuel Research. Brandon, week 7 is looking a little bit dicey. How you doing today?
Yeah, it's giving me flashbacks of last week when we had a low score. I think it was, can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was the lowest perfect lineup total score since FanDuel changed to the flex in 2018. And it was one of only like 3 regular season slates where the total FanDuel points for the perfect lineup was under 200 points.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be astonished if we're close to that. I think it's a little bit better.
Well, there's no Dolphins on this one, though, and that provided like half the perfect lineup scoring.
But got to change our opinion somehow, some way. And, we talked, was it last week we trended running backs and receivers in the flex or the week before?
2 weeks ago, I think, yeah.
Either way, that's going to come around this week, I think.
It definitely is. I think then I was like, I'm receptive to it. This week, it might be my default is receiver in the flex, just because running back is probably the thinnest position. This week, it's probably the thinnest it's been for a while, I would say, across a couple of years, maybe ever, honestly. And again, the thing we emphasize here is everyone else is dealing with the same issues. So this actually, I think, benefits people who pay attention, people who dig in, people give this a lot of thought. So I do like these slates, even though it's difficult to fill out lineups. Maybe the better way to phrase that is I like it because it's difficult to fill out lineups. And I think that does give us a leg up because I think, Brandon, we're very thoughtful about roster construction, thoughtful about opportunity costs. And I think that is probably, this is although this slate is gross, I think it does benefit player or people who put a lot of thought in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, although I would say I think by the looks of it, usually we're still clinging to running backs in the flex a lot. So that's the kind of thing that, we're, I don't want to say we're set in our ways, but we do a lot of research on why we do things, and that's kind of formed, and we're always willing to change when we get new information. There's a lot of new information this week, and that information is that running back's bad for the most part. So, but it's things like accounting for wind, I would say, falls into that too. Like, you can't just stack up games with super bad wind. I mean, maybe you can keep getting away with it, but long term, you're not going to keep getting away with it, that kind of stuff. So, I think that, I talk about this a lot when we do our golf podcast, but sometimes it is about like lineup construction and, how you do things. I think this week in particular, there are difference makers at each of the 4 main positions, but it's kind of up to you if you want to bet against huge games there. And then if like Mahomes, Allen, I'll put Justin Herbert in there and I guess Lamar, but then I'm kind of contradicting myself here in a sense. But like if Mahomes and Allen don't go completely bonkers, like you can get away with playing Geno Smith.
Yeah. And Geno's salary might be low enough where you can get away with it regardless.
Yeah.
I think that's the intriguing thing too. We'll talk about Geno. We'll talk about the Chiefs-Chargers game and much more to get you ready in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. We are here twice per week, Monday recap show, Thursday preview show, also live on the FanDuel YouTube page for both those days and up on FanDuel TV Plus after the fact. Don't forget, we also have weekly free play over at FanDuel Research. It's a free roll, so no entry fee to get yourself entered. Go to FanDuel.com/research, and that post will be up in the on the front page there, FanDuel.com/research, and click on the post with the free play link inside it to get yourself entered. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to the slate overview here for week #7 in NFL DFS. Brandon, we kind of talked a bit about it, but to me, I think the two keys for this week are deciding what you want to do with the value running backs or potential value running backs. I think that's kind of decision point one for me. And then where do you go to try to find upside? And I think that last week is kind of a good example of this, where like we talk about mistake erasers. And like Raheem Mostert was that, Tyreek Hill was that last week. Where do we find those mistake erasers in week #7? And do we need to spend down at running back in order to get those guys in our lineups? And I think that's kind of the key question I have for week 7. What's on your mind as you take a look at this main slate?
For me, we have games, especially the ones we'll talk about in the bookmaker section, that have some level of back and forth appeal. But you can kind of, or you may need to, depending on like your level of optimism, like you can kind of like some other teams or other games.
Mm-hmm.
And this feels like the kind of slate where you're going to have value to get up to a lot of different players. Like Travis Kelce's easy to roster if you're playing multiple value running backs. It's really easy to get shares of every game and kind of have a really wide player pool because not as many guys stand out in particular. And so for me, I'm already feeling like, well, I'll get some of these stacks just in case, some of those stacks just in case. And that's kind of what I'm fearful of this week, is not having the core plays that I typically have and then getting out over my skis on everyone and then not necessarily having good lineups, because the way that I like to do things is have a core and kind of pivot off of that. And still, like, so when Raheem Mostert hits and he's in the heavy majority of your lineups, that helps you if you have 15% of him and the rest of that lineup, those lineups are wrong. That's kind of what I'm fearful of this week, because there are a few core plays, but not as many as normal. And so I really need to get picky. And so I'll just say what you typically say is go through and rank the priorities and really figure out, like, last week I think we said Godwin. Who we had a few guys who were like, we're gonna go out of our way. ETN. Like we were like, we're gonna build around like these players.
It was every Jag, basically.
It was
ETN was the primary guy, but it was every Jag.
But like, do you see that this week? Because I kind of
I think that's the one area, like, I think we're pretty aligned in this slate. The one area where we may differ is that I actually I see the core plays. I have trouble seeing the fringe core plays. So I'm worried I might be too exposed to like Isaiah Pacheco. And like I can see paths to failure there. So that's why I'm a bit worried about it. Is like I think he's a great play. I see paths to failure for Jahmyr Gibbs, assuming he plays. Like I can find 3 guys I like, but the problem is I can see obvious paths to failure for them. But like anyone can fail. So I think like from an upside perspective, I have core plays I like. I have trouble finding others. So maybe it's like a limited entry week, where I just live in single entry, build around that core, and kind of lean into the strengths and like accept the fact that it could go very poorly. I think that's kind of the way I have to lean on this week.
And I think I was correct to say it comes down to your level of optimism. Because for me, I'm slightly pessimistic on Pacheco and Gibbs in particular.
It's fair.
I,
I can't push back on
you're
that.
up. So that's the thing is I'm not going to start my lineups with like Gibbs and Pacheco as a no brainer sort of. And I'm not saying you are, but
not no brainer, but like after weighing the pros and cons, I feel secure in saying that I think that it is the right move to use them. That's the most like wishy-washy phrasing ever, but it's intentional.
I'll say this. By Sunday, I had a small handful of lineups. Raheem Mostert was in every single one of them. I felt that good. I don't feel like anyone's necessarily close to that this week.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I agree that it's not quite there, but I think I'm a bit higher on like it's like the fringe core plays that make me, because like I can like I view it as like, can I view a path to upside for these guys? And I can. And I have a hard time viewing paths to upside for a lot of other guys, which kind of narrows down my core more. Like, what's the best case scenario for like certain guys at higher salaries? And it's like, probably not going to kill me not to use them. That's kind of where I come from.
We're on the same page. We're just phrasing it differently. Correct. I see the path to upside for Gibbs and Pacheco if we're just going to use them as examples. But if this were a bigger slate without a lot of weather, they would not be like, I'm going to start my lineup with those guys this week. Pacheco I'm probably going to, but
Pacheco might be usually. I think that Pacheco and Gibbs are like good plays for typical slates.
I think we'd be asking more questions about Gibbs if we had a lot of other plays.
I'm asking questions now, so that's fair. You're right. It's a fair comment.
We're saying the same thing. We're just phrasing it differently.
So let's dig into the injuries. Highlighting here in week number 7, Kyren Williams and Ronnie Rivers both likely to miss week 7 for the Rams. Rivers on IR, Williams is not. Zach Evans, Royce Freeman, Myles Gaskin are the backs on the active roster. Darrell Henderson is on the practice squad. So Evans, I think, is the primary guy here because he was the one guy out of that trio who was active last week. 6th-round rookie. Okay, testing numbers. He didn't test the combine, but did test his pro day. And like, he's the guy who's been at the team longest outside of Henderson, who was a free agent before this week. But like, what's your view of Evans at $4,800 for this week?
Yeah, I'm having trouble even like keeping track of how many guys are now on the team.
Well, it changed like yesterday, so that's fair.
Yeah, like it's just like, I think with Evans, I mean, he was like pretty solid across the board in terms of measurables, production, all that kind of stuff. In college, clearly wasn't getting, starter treatment or anything like that before these injuries. So I always like to be cautious of that. Is sometimes if players are getting on the field noticeably whenever the starters are healthy, that's telling us something. The salary though is so low at 48 that you have room for failure. We talk a lot about like we never want to play, players without a path to like 17, 18, 19 FanDuel points. If he has a true featured workload, I see that. But the salary is so low, under 5,000, that 13, 14 to get access to like a Kelsey stack is, or to get, I'll play him with Cooper Kupp. Like, I don't care if they're on the same team. So that again, if I'm using him to get a mistake eraser and he has a 60% snap rate and has an imperfect role, I can live with it.
I think like best case scenario for him is a Pacheco role where they have a McKinnon type guy come in for pass blocking and like 3rd and long and stuff like that, and takes away high value touches from him, and that would stink.
Yeah.
And like, so his best case scenario is very imperfect, and that matters, which is why I think that for Evans, I want to like actively make sure I have a lid on my roster rate to him. Like, if let's say I'm doing a 3 entry tournament, I don't want him in more than one of those lineups. I think I will put him in one because he gets me access to Eckler potentially, Cup, Kelsey, and all those guys are really good accounting for salaries. It's harder to get to them. I did build the lineup before we went on air with Herbert and Kelsey, and that was fine. I could get there without going with Zach Evans. You don't have to use him to get to Kelsey, but like he makes it a lot easier. I couldn't get to Cup or Eckler in that lineup, but like I think as long as you are being responsible with your exposure to him, he's fine. Just keep in mind that like I don't think he'll be getting like those 3rd down snaps. I don't think there's any chance he plays in the 2-minute drill, which there's a lot of lost opportunities there as well. But you know, he's probably gonna get a decent amount of work. And I would also say the opportunity cost of having him on your roster is lower this week than usual. Cause like typically if you're burning a spot on a guy who gets you, like you said, like let's say 13 FanDuel points, that's not going to be enough. Like that's missed out on another dart throw at a guy who could get you 20. And I don't think that's as big of an issue this week. So I would keep it capped around 30%. Is that too high for you? What do you think?
I think 30 works. I mean, if you take a scroll through running backs in particular, like I think I said I don't really have like core plays by Sunday. Austin Eckler might get there.
Sure.
Which is, anyone who's listened to us for a while knows that's kind of wild, but
Yeah.
In this game, his role is almost certain to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kenneth Walker,
He's way high salary.
that
Like we're gonna talk
salary's
about it in a bit, but like my
okay.
gosh, that salary's high.
Like Saquon's facing a good defense and
Jacobs is a
is,
backup quarterback and like hasn't been efficient with his starting quarterback.
and then you're already down into the guys just splitting time in some form or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
We love Bijan Robinson as a talent. Love Isaiah
Red zone rolls
Pacheco, but like
booty.
his role still, like Pacheco, like it's still not
Imperfect.
So again, the odds that a running back other than Eckler gets like 25 to 30 is pretty low. So
Yeah.
that all goes into this, and that's another reason why we like receiver in the flex a lot this week.
And if you're new to the show and haven't listened to us in previous years, when we say 30% for a value running back, like 30% exposure, we're willing to go 100. So 30% for us is pretty mild enthusiasm. And I think that's worth noting is that like, we're lower on this value running back than a lot of other ones. David Montgomery expected to miss week 7 with a rib injury. Jahmyr Gibbs got in a limited practice on Wednesday. He is trending toward playing. Craig Reynolds has toe and hamstring injuries. I'm not sure if those are correlated, but didn't practice on Wednesday. We'll talk about the Lions in the bookmaker section. I think the Reynolds injury is noteworthy, though. I would just say that here. Aaron Jones got in limited practice Wednesday with his hamstring injury. He has played one game since week 1, and they are coming off a bye here. We'll talk about the Packers in the bookmaker section as well. Zach Charbonnet didn't practice Wednesday with a hamstring injury, so that helps Walker be more attractive. If he were to sit, that could boost the appeal in Kenneth Walker III. We'll talk more about the Seahawks in the bookmaker section. Justin Watson missed practice Wednesday. He's expected to miss week 7 with an elbow injury. We'll talk about the Chiefs in the bookmaker section. Deshaun Watson missed another practice Wednesday with his shoulder injury. Seems to imply we're probably going to get another week of PJ Walker. Kareem Hunt didn't practice Wednesday with a thigh injury, which could help Jerome Ford, but it's still PJ Walker. They're playing indoors against the Colts, which is a mid-tier offense. But does Walker likely starting push the Browns offense out of play for you?
I mean, realistically, that's Amari Cooper and Jerome Ford that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Ford's salary is 66. Cooper's is 68. I'm going to have a hard time prioritizing those players, especially because I'm not going to stack that game like with bringbacks. It's probably going to push them out, like all of that context. I don't mind Ford or Cooper if you're trying to differentiate. I don't think it's being completely silly, but I think you can still do a bit better That like 6,000 range at receiver is pretty loaded this week, and I would rather. I mean, if you had to play, well, if you're building 10 lineups, how many of them are going to have Jerome Ford over Jahmyr Gibbs?
0.
Yeah,
I would need more to get there.
yeah.
Like this total is low. It's 40 points. I actually have the total in my model is 39.5. So like it's actually below that, which is like actually highest in the main slate. Just kidding. It's actually not. Josh Allen got in a limited practice Wednesday with his shoulder injury. He says he'll be good to go, but he's banged up again. We'll talk about the Bills in the trends section. What?
I just reading this note. I was going to make which Josh Allen, and then it doesn't actually specify which team in the notes. So it was just funny. But
are they even playing? Yeah, they're playing tonight.
Yeah.
So,
That was
yeah.
That's why I didn't rifle off the joke.
Good Josh Allen's playing tonight. I should have specified other one. Daniel Jones got in a limited practice Wednesday with his neck injury. It's still not a lock that he plays. He told Kay Adams on Up and Adams, shout out FanDuel TV, that he still has symptoms of the neck injury. How much would Jones playing impact your view of the Giants offense if it's Jones versus Tyrod Taylor?
In a vacuum, which Giants are in play for you? Like
Saquon.
Just Saquon anyway. Like
I'd rather get hit by a bus for everybody else. What's Waller's salary? 6,000. Yeah, I'd rather get hit by a bus.
Yeah, I mean,
I took the under on this game too. The total there is 39.5. I have 37.5.
If this game erupts, it could still, other than like Saquon, you could still be fine because everything's going to be dispersed.
I do think that Saquon is like viable, at least given that they kind of brought him back to a very good workload. Should get a lot of passing game work. I think that, like we were talking before about like, can player X actually burn me? I think the only guys above Pacheco other than Eckler who could are Saquon Barkley and Aaron Jones. I think everything else is kind of like, like they score 18 points max. Does that kill me? I think that Saquon's in that discussion. Do I want to make him a core play? No. If I have 10 lineups, if I get into Saquon, probably not. I think that's more of like a, getting in a FOMO line of situation, which we want to avoid. But like he's more in play than a lot of other guys up there. Just kind of shows you, I think, more where I'm at on them than on him.
I think Saquon's a really good example of what I was sort of alluding to at the top of the show, where it's like, well, I don't love Eckler to like just because I always think his role is a little bit imperfect.
Yeah.
So I'll get some Saquon, and like I just keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the risk that I run personally,
for sure. The Steelers could get Deontay Johnson back this week. He practiced Wednesday in limited fashion, eligible to return off of IR. Pat Freiermuth also practiced Wednesday, so the Steelers could be fully healthy. And Brandon, I think that's awesome because I don't want to think about the Steelers, and it's a lot easier to ignore them if they're all healthy. So where are you on the Steelers against the Rams?
Love the Rams, so it's tough. Where I'm gonna like naturally, I want to have bringbacks. Just for correlation. There is correlation long term, based on a per game basis. I've done research on that. But Kenny Pickett's not necessarily efficient enough to support multiple pass catchers. I think with Johnson back, like again, it might sound, if anyone's like listening to us for the first time this year, might sound a little like back and forth. We're like, well, this should help the offense be more efficient. So it's good news. They have a long way to go to becoming just baseline efficient.
Yeah.
So it's like George Pickens, I would probably have played without Deontay.
Sure.
Just from a volume standpoint, I don't think I'll quite get there. Even if it's a more efficient approach. And he's got upside, of course. He's really, really good, but I think I'm out.
Yeah. And the Rams defense is not as bad as I thought they'd be coming into the year too. So I think that's okay and allows me to be lower on them. Both starting quarterbacks may be out for the Bears and the Raiders. Justin Fields has a dislocated thumb, putting Tyson Bagent in line to start. Jimmy Garoppolo didn't practice Wednesday with a back injury. I would guess it's Aiden O'Connell who will start over Brian Hoyer if Garoppolo can't go. Hoyer's been the backup like during games, but like if they had the full week to prepare O'Connell, I think that he'll start, in part because I don't think Hoyer can last a full game. But the Bears did get Travis Homer back at practice Wednesday. He has a hamstring injury. Roshan Johnson didn't practice and is still in concussion protocol. So I think we saw enough last week to say the Bears backfield is dust regardless, unless Roshan were to magically appear back. And I'm not going to use any of them. So kind of asking you, any Raiders attractive to you this week?
We can nitpick this slate. I think we can still do better than the Raiders. It sucks because like
We have
I
the
like Josh
Devontae Adams
Jacobs.
squeaky wheel narrative. Like that's very in play this week. And like Michael Mayer is good, Jacoby Myers is good, but it's like this game environment is booty, and they might have a backup likely have a backup quarterback.
Like Josh Jacobs has had 5+ targets in each of the past 5 games and 17 or more carries in 5 of 6 games for the year. And like, it's just the offensive expectations here make it really hard to sort of prioritize. I think Jacobs could still be viable, but I want Jimmy back. If Jimmy were back, I would have a substantial amount of Jacobs.
Jimmy back. I want more. No? You don't want in?
I don't know what you wanted me to do with that.
I wanted you to join in. Could have gotten a chorus going. I don't think the pass catchers are totally out of play. Wind is actually okay in Chicago this week, 8 miles per hour as of right now. So like Devontae Adams, 8,000 squeaky wheel narrative. That's not terrible. Jacoby Myers, 74. Like that might be a little bit high for me. Michael Mayer though is 49. 80% snap rate in week number 6, I believe, and gotten a good number of targets. So like, if you want to get off of Luke Musgrave, who I think will probably be pretty popular, and I'm not sure necessarily he should be at $5,000, I think that like Mayer's fine. I will likely have Mayer in my player pool. I'm undecided on Devontae, leaning towards no, but at least I'm receptive to him if my sentiment changes on him later in the week. But like probably a no for this game right now for me.
I know there's a 1:00 game, but let's just say you have 8,000 for a flex. Devontae or Josh Jacobs?
Oh gosh. Probably Devontae, right?
I'd go Jacobs, I think.
Okay, that's fair. You want to do a bet?
Sure.
Okay. I don't feel like super strong in it, but like we haven't done enough of these. So,
yeah.
All right. Let's dig in now to the bookmaker section for week number 7. Highest total on the slate by a decent margin is the Chiefs and the Chargers. That's at 47.5. The Chiefs are favored here by 5.5. Total though has come down 3 points from open. Spread has tightened a smidge here. We have some potential value plays in this game. We've got studs as well, but it is guaranteed to be popular because there's nothing else in the slate. So which ways are you looking to stack this game that might be a bit different from the field?
That might be a bit different.
Yeah.
Running back.
Okay, I like that.
Eckler and Pacheco. Like I'm with you. I don't want to sound like I'm too low on Pacheco. I think he's a great play relative to the slate. I just don't think that he's as great a play in like the full scope of what I typically want, just because the salary is a little bit up there.
Can I give you the case for Pacheco? And you can still disagree with me. That's fine. But like the case for him.
Sure. I mean, I'm gonna play him a decent amount.
Right. I want to tell you the rationale behind why I think I'm higher on him. Okay. And like, again, you can still disagree with me. That's fine. The arguments against him are still valid, but like over the past 3 games, Pacheco has had the highest snap rate of his career, the second highest snap rate of his career, and the 4th highest snap rate of his career. So the snaps are up, which is good.
But what are those snap rates though?
64%, 58%, and 63%. Like they're not great, but like for a guy on this slate at 74 in this game on this offense, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Context matters. And the context of him being on the Chiefs would be good no matter what the slate is. Carry totals in those games 20, 16, 16. Target totals 3, 1, and 6. 158 yards in one game, 64 in one, 98 in another. So his role has been good. Red zone share is still flawed around 31% in that time. But like you expect more red zone trips from this team as well. So that's why I am on Pacheco is the snap rate is up. The target numbers are better this year than they were last year. So I think that like he is not ETN in week 6, but he has shades of ETN, and that's why I like him at 74.
We're on the same page
Okay.
here. I'm just naturally more pessimistic to the point that like if I'm staring at a blank lineup, I'm not necessarily feeling like Pacheco is the first play I plug in.
He
It
would be
sounds like
among the first for me.
he would be among the first because there aren't a lot of other options, not because I actively
Sure.
think he's like the best play at this salary.
Lobby CDQ says Pacheco-ism. I agree.
Yes, it is
You've been promoted to
Pacheco's.
co-host.
It's
Congratulations.
Pacheco season because running back is really, really iffy this week. It's
Yeah.
Pacheco season
I
again.
don't
I
think
know
it's.
it's
I think he'd be in play on other slates. Is what I'm saying. Let's talk about quarterback here. We have Patrick Mahomes 92, Justin Herbert 83. Among quarterbacks on this slate, so considering the context, where are these guys like top tier plays for you, or would you rather say some salary?
I think if I'm gonna take, the health of Craig Reynolds is going to be really important because if he's not active or if he's really like limited, that makes Jameer Gibbs, I think, the like locked in sort of play in my main lineup. And by that, like it's hard to pass up Mahomes and Herbert, even though there's not a lot of like there. You don't have to if you're betting on Mahomes to have a good game, he might be the only one to have 30 plus,
Yeah.
and that matters. I know you have to account for salary and all this kind of stuff, but at a certain point, points are points, and you can't just make up for that by having a really balanced lineup, that kind of thing. So Mahomes and Herbert probably should be close to priorities for me. I really need to figure out how they line up against Geno Smith.
Yeah.
If I'm building my main lineup or if I'm building just one lineup, Smith's really appealing
Yeah.
at the salary of 7,000. It helps open up a lot, but where are these two in conversation for you if you're again sort of looking at like blank lineup? Who are you trying to plug in? Because it probably should be Mahomes and Herbert
Yeah,
toward
I
the
like
top.
Herbert a lot. I think the counterpoint against Mahomes would be I can soak up most of his production by using Kelsey at 85. And so like I think the idea of going with a Herbert Kelsey stack is pretty attractive to me, where I'm getting the production, most of the production from both sides here. And again, I was tinkering before the show, and I can do this without using Zach Evans. So it does require me to like flood the mid range at receiver, including using Josh Palmer as my stack with Herbert, but I'm fine with that. I think Herbert's or Palmer's role has been very good. I like other mid range receivers. So I will get to Mahomes because I like this game enough, but like I think I like Herbert more, is the way I would say that.
Yeah, I think Herbert versus Lamar is something I need to really figure out and think about. I probably should just lean Herbert
Sure.
for the game environment, but I think what
I just went to the receiver tab on this game, and it's Keenan Allen 92. It falls all the way down to Josh Palmer 65. The next receiver is Rashee Rice at 56. And that's appropriate. Like, that's not
yeah.
even like weird. So, talk to me about the pass catchers here. I think that, like, I think that the question you have at stud this week is who do you prioritize more? And the candidates there are Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, and Cooper Kupp. And I would lean towards Kupp personally, which is going to force me to be in the mid range in this game, meaning Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Palmer, Rashee Rice. But like, I don't know. How do you view Eckler v. Allen v. Kupp?
I put Allen last, I think.
I agree,
Um
but I'll still include him in game stacks because you have to.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
But if I would say Eckler or Cup will be in my main lineup
sure.
for the sake of like I think they're that that level of play.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd probably lean Eckler. I like the game a lot more. I think it has a much higher chance of being a back and forth, touchdown heavy game. And
Mm-hmm.
let's be honest, Eckler has 4 touchdown upside because
Correct.
he's Austin Eckler. So
Yeah.
I'd lean Eckler, but I love Cup. And I think Keenan is more of, I'm not going to say game stacks only, but as far as like actually building my lineups out, he's probably going to find himself in the ones where there are game stacks because I'm
Yeah.
not going to go out of my way to plug him in by himself.
So what about Josh Palmer and Rashee Rice? Palmer's salary is $6,500 in the first 2 games with no Mike Williams. Pretty good usages for Josh Palmer. No touchdowns in either of those games, but the yardage has been there. He's had, I think, pretty good usage. $6,500 for him. Justin Watson, as mentioned, probably not going to play this game. Rashee Rice's snap rate did go up. I think he ran around on a little bit more than half the dropbacks on Thursday, with Watson leaving pretty late in that game. So I've had like a seesaw battle with Rashee Rice where I was high on him, then I was low on him after the Vikings game. Now I'm back like, yeah, 56 is fine for him. How are you viewing those two guys as being low salaried exposure to this game?
Yeah, routes were down pretty much across the board in week 6 for the Chiefs, although it's not that strange for them to spread the routes around. That's just typical. I'm only considering Rice because of the game.
Yeah.
Palmer I'm good with, but like I still think these are mostly game stack candidates. I don't know if they stand out enough to me on their own
Yeah.
to want to get there. And it's not the same salary or anything, and it's not the same position, but we're talking like receiver in the flex. I would go out of my way to restructure a lineup to get from like Rice to Jahmyr Gibbs in the flex. Like it's not a conversation. So that probably sums up where I am. This team is just not very fantasy friendly outside of Mahomes and Kelsey and Pacheco.
Yeah, with Rice, like his salary is pretty close to Zay Flowers. It's 63 versus 56. So it's not super close, but it's close enough where it's like, that's kind of tough. So I'd rather get to that. But like if I need to save salary, if like using Rashee Rice is the key to getting in like a Cup or a Kelsey, et cetera, I'm fine going there. But like I want to make sure I'm getting something as compensation for doing so, basically.
Rice or Zach Evans in a vacuum.
Probably Rice. I don't know.
I think they both have capped. I think they both have capped upside too.
They're both flawed, just for different reasons. Okay, let's go to our second game here, and it's the second highest total, and it's a game that I hate. 2 middling offenses for the Broncos and the Packers. Total is 45. Packers are favored by 1.5. Both these defenses stink, which is why the total is high, but it's also not a high pace game. The offenses here leave plenty to be desired, if I'm being generous. Are you as high in this game as the betting markets imply we should be? Because like from a process perspective, this fits what we typically look for when you consider the rest of the total on the slate.
So, I mean, there are going to be games throughout the season where the totals, good relative to the context of the slate, maybe tight spread, and it could put up points, but still not necessarily be super fantasy friendly if the market shares are dispersed. I think the main play for me in this game is going to be Christian Watson. We're talking receiver in the flex. I think he makes a ton of sense in that he's 6,600 is the salary. Stepped into a bigger role in his second week back. I think there's a lot more room to grow and a really plus matchup. You mentioned Musgrave at tight end. I think the routes were down, but they're coming out of coming off the bye. Teams with early buys always something to sort of look at, especially for rookies. Should have more time to get acclimated, kind of see what's actually going on a little bit more. I think like that is a reason to be more positive for Musgrave. I don't really want to play the Broncos.
No,
So like,
they're cross off.
Who in this game is going to be in your player pool?
So the reason I'm sour on Musgrave is they're gonna if Aaron Jones plays, they'd have another relevant pass catcher, and like it's already not the most accurate target distribution for Luke Musgrave. That's what it is. So like especially if he's popular at 5,000, I'd want to dump off pretty fast. Like he fits what I want, high total, tight spread for a tight end, but like I think they're scary situations for him, especially again, that's assuming Aaron Jones plays. Jones at 77, I would probably like if I have 10 lineups, I would not be shocked if he were to get to my player pool. $7,700. I think that I get there in large part because they had started to realize that AJ Dillon's struggling. Not sure if like there's an injury there or what, but like it's been rough for him. So I think it might be more of like a need-based thing that they'd use Aaron Jones and kind of up his usage. We know that he's dynamic in the passing game, looked awesome before his injury in week 1. So like I would say Jones and Watson are the only two guys I'm considering, but I'm decently likely to get to both of them potentially. I can't get to either. Like Jordan Love's salary is 78. Like my gosh, he's 800 higher than Geno. Why? Tell me why. Tell me why. It's again leading.
We're gonna get copyright claimed here, man. It
That's fine.
sounded
It's less
too
than
much
15
like
seconds.
the real
No,
thing.
it's fair use. It's less than 15 seconds. Come on, study your copyright law here, brother. You took journalism. You know what copyright law is. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I should have just passed up on the joke to be accurate. That's how jokes work.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Okay. So we are okay with Watson. We're okay. Where are you on Aaron Jones? Assuming he's full by Friday.
I'm more than okay with Watson.
Okay.
I think he's one of the best plays at receiver relative
Watson
to salary.
or Tyler Lockett?
Watson.
Interesting.
It's very close.
Okay, fair.
And maybe I'm thinking that because, spoiler alert, Tyler Lockett's your player pick. One of your player picks. And I just went to Watson. I think I can make a pretty compelling case though for Watson.
So you go Watson over Chris Godwin too then?
Yeah.
Okay, fair. I mean, he gets deep targets, which is what we really want here. So, Any other thoughts for you on this game?
Aaron Jones, full by Friday, might be very, very appealing though.
I think he's most appealing in like single entry, just because I think people will be worried about him coming off the injury. So if he gets full by Friday, I think he's a very attractive single entry play.
I mean, his rushing success rate 64%. Dylan's is 39%, which is a roughly league average. Not particularly good there. And it's just, looking back, it's one of those like, oh, Aaron Jones against a really bad defense probably should have been higher there.
Yeah. And Dylan's snap rate, I guess it went back up last week, but it had been kind of low. And he played better last week too. Also, fun fact, of all the running backs who have logged an offensive snap this year, highest to an alphabetical order, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon. There's your fun fact for today. Let's move now to our final game in the bookmakers section. That is the Cardinals at the Seahawks. Seahawks have an implied total here, 26, which is the second highest in the slate, behind just the Chiefs. The Cardinals, 7.5 point or underdogs here. Total is 44.5. Cardinals defense has been really rough. And on this podcast, we adore Geno Smith. So I'm aboard of Seattle. What's your preferred route for doing so? And any bringbacks for you on the Cardinals side?
Preferred route would probably be a Geno and Lockett stack, which I don't think is super revolutionary, but it's very salary friendly. And preferred bringback, did you ask? Or do I?
Prefer bringback implies there is one. Like, I don't want to force you to have a bringback here if you don't want it. But like, are there any players you're considering running it back with in your Seahawks lineups?
Are you down on Brown?
I'm still good with him personally.
Yeah.
I think that he'd be the one guy I'd want to go to, probably the only guy I'd want to go to, which means if you give me 10 Geno lineups, I'm probably having a run back only in 5.
So this is one of those types of games where it's sort of the antithesis of Packers Broncos, where like if it's good, we're probably gonna know who made it good.
Yeah.
And if it's bad, then it's all right. This game then is much more stackable for me. Like I like Watson. I'll talk more about him in the player pick section, but it's really hard to like the Broncos. It's really hard to like too many more Packers. But in this one, it's a 1 QB game, right?
I'm off
Is
that.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. That was a moment of weakness on my end.
I think 3 viable pass catchers, assuming health. Maybe Walker. Walker's probably one of those plays where people are like, "This is the most obvious play," and we're like, "Well, the salary's a bit high."
If Charbonnet can't go, it would change my view of Walker quite a bit because I think then the odds that he burns me for not using him are a lot higher.
Walker without Charbonnet or Eckler.
I'd probably still go Eckler, but
Yeah.
it's at least a fair question then, because like I don't even want Walker at all if Charbonnet plays. Honestly, like the salary's so high.
Walker or Saquon.
With no Charbonnet,
Yeah.
Walker then.
Yeah.
I think that's a
I
tipping
think
point for me, and I'd put him over Jacobs too at that point, just because the offense should be more functional.
should be. Yeah.
You would hope. Um, with Geno, salary $7,000. That's super low. He's in a very good matchup here against Arizona. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks who run on this slate, and one of those guys who does run is dealing with a shoulder injury, and Josh Allen. Lamar is playing in heavy winds, so I think that because of the circumstances of this slate, Geno at 7,000 is very much in play. And like you said, we know where to stack him. That's Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. Both these guys continuing to get good shares. Metcalf didn't practice Wednesday. He has a rib injury and a hip injury, but I think he'll be he barely practices and plays all the time. So I think he'll be fine. But I like Lockett a lot at 68. And then if you go with a Geno, Lockett, Marquise Brown lineup, you can get to Eckler or get to Kelsey or get to Cup in that lineup pretty easily. So I think this is a really, really good game,
Did
personally.
did Jackson Smith and Jigba pop for you on their recap show? Because coming out of the bye, as I sort of alluded to with Musgrave, I mean the box score doesn't look necessarily phenomenal, but his route rate went from in like the 60-ish% range. It was 75% in week 4 before the bye, and then a season high 82% for him. Salary couldn't be much lower. Um, do you think you could justify him or probably not?
I won't get there personally. I think you can justify him because the game is good enough.
Yeah.
And like you said, like the side numbers are good. My issue with Smith and Jigba is he is getting zero deep work. And I really want that for my value plays. Like he has 2 deep targets the entire year. The counterpoint to that is that they just got Charles Cross back, their left tackle. And we'll talk about this in the trend section with the Ravens, but like getting a left tackle back gives you more time to throw downfield. So maybe Smith and Jigba starts to get, more downfield targets eventually. I haven't seen that yet though, which is why I'd rather go Rashee Rice at 56, even considering the salary, than Smith and Jigba at 49. But I get why you're asking. I think that's fair.
Okay. It was just, I mean, the routes are up.
Yeah.
Obviously, rookie after a bye, always something. Not the week necessarily after a bye, but you see if something got worked out.
Smith and
Uh,
Jigba or Rice for you, considering salary?
Rice because he's not. Well, he might be the receiver 7 on his own team, depending on the week. But
Yeah.
Rice. But I think JSN is at least. I mean, Zach Evans over him in a flex, but
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
something to monitor here with
Sure.
his route rate involvement, and if he gets more downfield work or if he just becomes the underneath guy, which is very plausible too.
Yeah. Any other thoughts for you on this game?
I think we covered it.
Okay, let's dive into our trend section now. And we're going to have a couple trends on this next game, which is the Ravens and the Lions. I think if the wind were not a factor in this game, it would be the number 2 game on the slate for me as far as stacking goes. So it's kind of a bummer the wind is there. Currently 15 miles per hour in Baltimore, but I still think it's in play for stacking, even considering that, because we got a lot of good pieces here. So you're going to talk about the Lions offense and they face good defenses. And then I'll talk about the Ravens side in my trend.
Yeah. So, the sample size for teams against good or bad defenses is always something to sort of look for, especially early on. But Detroit's averaging 28 points per game. That's 4th best in the NFL. Ravens are a really good defense. According to numberFire's metrics, third in adjusted pass defense, 10th in adjusted rush defense. Detroit's faced just one top 12 pass defense this season in terms of, again, numberFire scheduled adjusted metrics. That was week 1 against the Chiefs. Goff went for 253 and a touchdown. They were extremely run heavy relative to expectation overall, but also relative to expectation. But one thing I like to do is adjust every drop back for opponent expectation. That way it kind of gives us a better example of how guys are playing, not necessarily just in certain splits where we're kind of knocking down the sample size, but he's been really good with 0.21 passing net expected points per drop back over expectation. It's a top 5 rate in football. Again, doesn't necessarily guarantee that he's great against good defenses, but he's doing more than what defenses typically allow. And that's very, very nice. Last year, because a really small sample, Goff played 6 top 10 pass defenses, played slightly better than expectation. Average stat line was about 237 yards and 1.5 touchdowns, which is enough to keep the offense moving in the first place. But in 2 of those, Amon-Ra St. Brown was limited. In the 4 others, 2.3 touchdowns per game, passing net expected points per dropback mark of 0.23. Really good there, even against tough defenses. So I think there's enough here where we can get in on this offense and not necessarily fear it too much. Last week with David Montgomery leaving early, Detroit had like their first pass heavy game of the year, pass rate over expectation. So this accounts for, game score, time left, all that kind of stuff, like, each down and distance. Their pass rate over expectation was plus 13.8%. Leading into that week, their pass rate over expectation was a minus 6.1%. So we could see them throw the ball a bit more. I think that's good for Jahmyr Gibbs, who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I'm not necessarily posting that as like a negative for Gibbs. But in 5 games with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's over a 30% target share, 46% of the red zone work. Sam Laporta, we're talking about like Luke Musgrave, like rookie tight ends. He's clearly there. And if they're going to pass the ball more, that's relevant, especially with the wind up. Don't quote me on this, but should generally be good for tight ends who just naturally have lower ADOTs, even if they can get some downfield work.
Better
He's at a 20.
target shares, but like it also lowers scoring expectation,
Yeah.
which is what we want for tight ends. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah. But I don't know how many touchdowns we're going to get across the board this week. So that also helps. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs is, again, he's not necessarily Craig, rest up, get healthy.
Take the week off, Craig.
If that's the case, Gibbs is that guy for me, like just for sure. He's getting an insane amount of opportunities on a per snap basis. So if you increase the snaps, that should really work out. But point being here, I think this team is not one we need to fear because it's a tough defense. It's honestly the wind. So why don't you talk to me about the Ravens, and then we'll loop this game all together, put a nice bow on it.
Yeah, so I want to look at the Ravens offense because we've had some guys in and out of the lineup for them, and want to look at their target shares when they've had their guys healthy. They've had 3 games with both Mark Andrews and Odell Beckham healthy. So look at those games, see what their target shares were in those. In those 3 games, Nelson Aguilar actually has a higher target share than Beckham and Rashad Bateman. So they're all a cross-off. That makes it very easy. I adore it. But both Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews are at 24%. Zay, 44% of the deep targets in those 3 games. Now, that is inflated by the 7 deep targets he got in week 5, but he did get 7 deep targets. That is still helpful. And I think part of it could be the return of Ronnie Stanley at left tackle. Stanley got hurt late in week 1, played in weeks 5 and 6. So looking at the games that Stanley has played, Lamar's average depth of target is 8.4. In the games without Stanley, it's 7.4. So a full yard difference. I think that ups the viability of Flowers. His salary is $6,300. Even if the wind does remain high, I am still very okay with Flowers at that salary this week. This has helped Mark Andrews too. He has just 3 deep targets so far this year. Again, deep for me is 16 plus yards downfield, but the ADOT for Andrews in his 2 games with Ronnie Stanley is 9.9. It was 6.7 in 3 games without Stanley.
9-9?
9-9? Andrews' target share in games of the Dell is 24%. With all the value we have in running back, we can definitely get to Andrews 69. I think that's very okay with me. So typically when the wins are this high, I'm underweight, but my model likes the over on this game, even with the win being accounted for. I am very okay with Andrews. I think Flowers is a core or borderline core play, and he'd be a core play if there were lower wind. I'm lower on Lamar than some of the other guys, but if the win were to come down, I would love him at $8,000. So how are you viewing the Ravens offense in this game in general this week?
Yeah, I looked at the same splits here because I'm interested in this offense. Obviously, we factor in win more than most. So, like, if we weren't thinking about that, we would love this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really appealing is a Gibbs Flowers mini stack.
Yeah.
It's a really salary friendly stack. There's paths to upside for both of those players. I always put Gibbs in the next one so that my stacks are close to each other. Helps me.
What?
Yeah, you got to click and drag him down.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, we went over this.
Oh yeah, because I was thinking about the flex stuff. I always like take
Yeah.
the guys. So like, sorry, indulge me. No, stupid. Okay, let's put Montgomery in the flex or like Amon-Ra. Oh gosh, this is a nightmare. I'm sorry. Can I like swap them by doing this?
I think it overwrites them, but you could
Oh,
just drag someone else.
that's still easier than what I was doing.
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
But then,
Happy?
but like, I build my lineups.
You go by descending salary, which is also bananas.
No, that's for golf.
Oh, okay.
This I try to get my stacks close by so I can make sure that I have stacks and I don't have multiple player. Like I'm not really a 2 pass catcher kind of like
Yeah.
a QB and 2 pass catcher. Like I want to make sure I avoid that kind of stuff. In most instances. But anyway, what's important here? Well, it is important too because but I think Gibbs, Flowers, Andrews, Amon-Ra, 4 plays who would easily be core level for me if the wind were down.
Yeah.
But even with the wind, I think the salaries for Gibbs and Flowers account for that because it's not like wind being up means that Zay Flowers will get 0 targets.
Right.
It just it makes it a little more volatile that he'll get there. But this is probably my favorite sort of mini stack that we might have talked about so far.
I agree. What about Andrews for you at 69? Considering we have Kelsey at 85, but that's a pretty big salary. Tight end, is not the worst it's ever been, but it's also not the best. How do you feel about Andrews at 69 and Laporta at 65?
Andrews is a player pick for me.
Okay.
The salary is just very viable. He can bridge that gap and get close to Kelsey if things go his way. I don't like doing the anecdotal stuff, but I feel like Andrews tends to sort of have good games when we don't expect it as much.
I've felt the exact same way.
so in this instance, we're like, well, the wind, it could, and then he scores twice and has 110 yards, that kind of thing. Laporta definitely fine with. I just would have a hard time putting him over Andrews, and the salary is close enough. Yeah. And I like Gibbs enough where he's probably going to be in a ton of my lineups.
Yeah.
Especially if he's the only really healthy, relevant back. So it's going to be harder to get to Laporta than Andrews from that perspective as well. Plus, I love Amon-Ra, and he can get downfield work, but he can also get a lot of those, bunny targets. So
that's a good combo to have. Getting both. Yeah. I did get a comment on YouTube from Nick G saying, I get the vibes these guys don't like each other outside of the stream. Brandon came to my wedding. This is the result, Nick, of having worked together for 8 years. This is our 9th NFL season together. I'm going to yell at Brandon a lot. So it's not that. I guarantee it. Love Brandon. Just I have to yell at him. It's my legal obligation to yell at him at all times. So I appreciate you asking this, but no.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't an ask. It was a get the... But,
it's a valid comment, Nick. Your concerns and feelings are valid, but no, it's just because of 9 years of bickering leads to this.
What was it, Nick? You said,
yeah, Nick.
So Nick, this is what happens whenever you say, like, I think Isaiah Pacheco is a really good play, but I just don't know if he's a core play. And then you get told, let me sell you on Isaiah Pacheco.
I was selling you on why I was higher on him than you are. Anyway, let's leave that there and go on to your second trend. I will give you the floor to talk about the Rams offense with Cooper Kupp, because Cooper Kupp rules. And if you've listened to us for all 9 years, you know that I do not say that lightly. But Cooper Kupp is great. I'm excited to have him back in our lives. What have you seen from this Rams offense since he returned?
Yeah, love having Cooper Kupp completely back, basically. There was a debate, apparently. I'm not on Twitter a lot, but I guess there was a debate over, whether this offense could support Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I think we kind of know by now what that answer is. And for Cooper Kupp, he's got a 38% target share, over 10 targets per game on average, averaging 133 yards. He's got outputs of 118 and 148. That's sick. 43% red zone share, 40% end zone target share. But I think one name that easily could get overlooked this week is Puka Nacua, and we're really looking at Kupp here as like a core level start your lineup with play, but he's still got some good workload in this sample. Over a 30% target share. I know the 7 targets for 4 catches, 26 yards last week, not great. Yardage is down. I understand that, but the salary has actually finally scaled back to like a very reasonable rate. And this game, while we don't have a lot of natural bringbacks that we want to go out of our way to get to, is a good game overall. And this team is just featuring 2 players in particular in terms of pass catching, and they're now without their starting running back. So you would think that there's going to be more natural increase in pass rate here. Nobody else, though, in these 2 games has better than 11% target share. So I'm not going to get out over my skis trying to get access to this offense. I will mention, though, that Tutu Atwell and Tyler Higbee are the other guys getting like 85% of the routes. So if you do want to get elsewhere, like those are the 2 names that you would want to consider. But this team also has, again, that potential value back. We've talked about Zach Evans a decent amount already. Pretty average across the board in terms of, and average is like fine because there's a lot of ups and downs in college profiles. But in terms of measurables, production, like hovering around the 50th percentile on a lot of those things. But, shout out Rich Rebar. There are a lot of like ancillary jabronis who could just get a lot of snaps, especially on third downs. Evans could have a 50% snap rate, but just not really be on the field in the red zone or on third down. He just gets rushing, and that's not enough on FanDuel if you're getting just like 15 carries and no targets and no high leverage work. It's hard to say, and we are guessing to some degree, unless there's a report that comes out by Sunday of but then even then it's never, I don't like to trust just the reports. I like to see it first, but
I
so
also
there's a little bit of
worry
risk.
about them because like there have been a couple times this year where like Jay Glazer has broken that news at like 2 minutes before lock, and it's like they're not a team that gets a lot of leaks out ahead of time, which is kind of annoying. Like they should be leakier.
So if we're just completely guessing, like you said, about 30% is the cap for Evans in terms of how many rosters he's on for us. I think that's very viable. But the Steelers, coming off of a bye, bottom 6 in defensive success rate against the pass, allowing a really high ADOT. I don't think there's a whole lot of reasons to worry about Kupp. How big of a priority is Kupp for you? Where are you with Nacua? And we already talked about Evans, so I'll just leave that one where it is.
Yeah, Nakua is a good shout out to mention. I agree with you. The target shares are good enough to justify the very low salary at 73. So very okay with that. I think Kupp, again, if I'm asking myself, do I prioritize Kupp or Eckler? I lean Kupp right now. So Kupp to me is a pretty big priority on this slate. And I have been an anti-Kupp person I've been annoyed by him because he's been so high salaried and so good for so long. But I think in this context where I'm not having to spend a ton of salary at running back, I can get to him. And if I can get to him, sure, I'd love him. So I think Kupp is a pretty decent priority. Like if I have one lineup on this week, 0% surprise if I have Cooper Kupp. in that lineup. I would prioritize him in that lineup over Eckler personally. I'll probably have Kelsey there too, so it might not get to Cup, but like, that's where I'm at with that one. And then again with Puka, I do like a lot of the 6,000 range receivers, so I might not get there, but it's more so just because I love them versus avoiding Nakua.
I mean, you mentioned being okay with like Jacoby Myers at 74. I know you're like kind of.
Oh no,
low
sorry,
on...
I said I was out on him. I might have misphrased that though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't want to get
Maybe
there
you
in that
did say
game.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just if it were a better game, but like
Yeah,
his target
I got
shares are
you.
great. He's good. But all right, let's talk about my second trend here and talk about the Patriots defense because we don't have a lot of like banger offenses on this slate, but we do have one in the Buffalo Bills. They're facing the Patriots defense, one we greatly respect because Bill Belichick is a very good coach. So I want to dig in and see whether we should avoid the Bills or if this spot is potentially one where we could get them at a reduced roster rate. Now, the key elephant in the room here is that Josh Allen has a shoulder injury, so that's definitely does put a damper on enthusiasm. But he says he's okay. Got no limited practice Wednesday. As long as he is full by Friday and taken off the injury report, I'm interested. From a betting perspective, the Bills implied total is 24.5. That ranks third in the slate behind Kansas City and Seattle. The Patriots defense has not been as lights out as we're used to. They're 12th overall in numberFire schedule adjusted metrics, but they're 20th against the pass versus sixth against the rush. And I don't want to touch the Bills' backs anyway, so fine by me. Be awesome there if you want. The pass defense has been especially bad since they lost Matthew Judon and Christian Gonzalez. Both those guys got hurt during the game in week 4. The Cowboys, Saints, and Raiders are the 3 teams they faced in that time, and they all had really good early down passing efficiency in those games. And they actually ran the ball pretty well too. So the injuries to Judon and Gonzalez seem to have a pretty big impact on this defense, not surprisingly, because both those guys are impact level players. I want to keep tabs on sentiment around Josh Allen. If it looks like he'll be low rostered, this might be a really fun spot to buy in, especially for single entry where people are, kind of playing more conservative cashy lineups. They're not going to use Josh Allen. So I think he's pretty fun, specifically in that format. As for the pass catchers, we know Bill Belichick wants to limit opposing top options. Stephon Diggs is very much that. But in 2 games, Diggs had a 30% target share against the Patriots. He had 92 and 104 yards with a touchdown in both those games. Gabe Davis's target share is 27%. He had 2.5 deep targets per game in those games. Didn't do a whole lot with it, but the productivity has been better for Davis this year. I'm not going to get to Davis as a standalone play, I don't think. But I'm fine having him. Like if I have 10 Allen stacks, I'm okay having two Gabe Davis lineups and 8 Stephon Diggs lineups. With that said, there is no bring back here. Allen is banged up. So any inclination for you toward the Bills offense or no?
I think it's a differentiation option for sure. We talk all the time about finding ways to be different without being dumb about it. And it's not dumb to play Josh Allen when people aren't, because he could go for 30, 35. And if Mahomes, and like that's a divisional game. I mean, it's definitely not a sure thing that's gonna, and it's the Chargers. I always feel like Chargers games are 3-0 at the end of the first.
Yeah, every time.
So I think you, and with one natural stack candidate in particular, you're gonna have the salary to do it. I'm all for it. I'm not bringing it back. Although,
nope, don't do it. Come on, don't do
because
this
I
to
hate,
me.
because we actually hate
Don't
each
do
other.
it. Don't do it.
Because we actually hate each other. What if I could interest you in a bring back for a sub 6,000 salary?
Oh, is it Kendrick Bourne?
Yeah.
Oh,
Who are you thinking?
I thought you were gonna say Ramondre.
No.
Bourne did have 11 targets last week. He has had 3 deep targets in 3 separate games. He had two.
His
The
routes like
Patriots have
dipped.
had 0, 1, or 2 red zone targets in 4 of their 6 games this year.
So like market shares matter and everything. But when they're tied to an offense this not good, that matters. But if you're willing to like take a chance on a Josh Allen kind of stack, naturally we want to bring it, like, our inclination should be to bring back stacks. In most instances, we don't want to force it, but if you're gonna get there, would you consider Bourne? Who, if you say yes, it's gonna. I might need to, even though again we don't like each other. I'll have to check on you if you're like, I will play Kendrick Bourne and Cooper Cup this week. That's Jim's signal.
I don't think I can do it. Like even joking, I don't think I can do it. It's
Okay.
just, yeah. Like it's a fair thing to ask. He has good enough target shares to justify it, but also I'd rather lose without Kendrick Bourne than win with him. Is where I'm at. I think. Is that fair?
No, I mean,
You
no,
can
but
say
it makes
no. It's
sense in your
okay.
head, so
Yeah.
it's all right.
All right. What about Allen for you? How many lineups would you need to get to Allen?
So I like Mahomes and Herbert, and I like that game from a back and forth standpoint. I like Lamar even with the wind up because he's running the ball a lot, and I really like Geno Smith. So that's 4 quarterbacks in a vacuum. Again, if I could play Josh Allen at the same salary as Geno Smith, I'd play Josh Allen, but that's not what we're talking about. I think I'd probably have to get to like 25 ish and build around those first 4 that I mentioned,
Okay.
and then get to Allen.
Sure. That's fair. Okay. Weather for this week does include that game. The 3 games with elevated winds this week. We talked about the Lions and Ravens. That's 15 miles per hour right now in Baltimore. That's the spot where I do downgrade guys, but like again, we like the market shares there enough where I'm still okay with it. Again, my model does still like the over, despite the fact the wind is high and it heavily accounts for wind. Giants Commanders wind speed there is 15 miles per hour, so downgrade those elite passing offenses, and then downgrade Patriots and Bills 13 miles per hour there. So luckily, it's torpedoing just one of the bad games, which is fine. But then downgrade to the Patriots, Bills, Lions, Ravens. Hopefully the wind does come down throughout the week. Let's now go position by position and break down our top plays on FanDuel for week number 7. Starting off at quarterback, Brandon, who stands out to you there?
Yeah, I just rattled off the 4 guys I like most with Mahomes, Herbert, Lamar, and Geno. My 2 picks here are going to be Lamar and Geno. I like the salaries a lot. Yeah, I know that the wind is going to be up in this one, but Lamar's still running the ball. He's got pass catchers that he can throw the ball to, and we can stack pretty convincingly with him, with Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers getting 24% target shares in games with everyone healthy. The passing efficiency for Lamar, even in these games, is right to the opponent expectation. So, that is what it is. But his passing success rate is almost 55% in these games. I'll take that. That could lead to more successful underneath passes as well. But even in games with Andrews and Odell Beckham both healthy, he's averaging north of 10 carries per game, 53.7 rushing yards per game, and almost 35% of the red zone rushes. The reason we like Lamar most weeks is the rushing plus some passing. The salary is down to the point where it's like, okay, he's a running quarterback with like decent passing. I'm fine with that at this salary. I think it makes a lot of sense. Second love is Geno Smith. He has the best floor. I mean, we don't talk about floor really, but like in terms of probable ranges of outcomes, hitting like a floor value threshold and then going over a ceiling value threshold, he's the best play from that perspective. In my simulation model, it accounts for projection, matchup, salary, just a lot of different stuff. Against the Cardinals, who are allowing a completion percentage over expectation, that puts them 29th in the NFL. He hasn't really had a lot of easy matchups, and in his one, he left early. Just played two-thirds of the snaps, so it's going to be his best matchup of the season so far. And I know it's a divisional game, but and the Cardinals are kind of trying to do what they can to keep games close. But this is the first time around matchup, which is always better.
Yeah. I have Geno as my player pick as well. He is my second quarterback here. And it's the same things you mentioned. I think that he just kind of makes a lot of sense and the salary's too low. Opportunity cost is a lot lower for this week. The Cardinals' pass defense has been hideous. So Geno is not a ceiling game yet, but like, would you say he has the building blocks for upside? Because I think I would say that personally.
I mean, we don't love. I mean, for quarterbacks who don't run, we kind of say like 350 and 4 is kind of where we need to get. With this salary, it's less than that,
And this slate too.
and this slate. But I mean, he's had. I'll give him. I'll give him a 300-yard game for 296. But he's then had 300-yard games this year. Multiple passing touchdowns just once.
Right.
The building blocks are definitely there. The efficiency is good enough. The matchup's good enough. Points could be there. So, yeah, I think the building blocks are there for, especially relative to this slate at this salary. It's there.
I agree. So Geno's my number 2. My number 1 is Herbert. The public tends to under roster quarterbacks who are underdogs, and I'm okay with them as long as I expect the passing to still be efficient. And the Chargers here are 5.5 point dogs. That's more than I typically want it to be. Like I typically want like a slight underdog, and the Chiefs defense is playing very well. But Herbert running a bit more recently. 12 rush attempts in week 4. He had 6 last week. He's had double-digit rushing yardage in 4 out of 5 games. So it's been a bit better in that regard this year. $8,300 is not bad for a guy who can sling it like this guy. We just saw he played terribly Monday, and the public just saw that. So I feel like his roster will probably be pretty low. So I do like Herbert quite a bit. If we were to get the win speeds down to like 12 or 11, I'd go Lamar over Herbert. But for right now at 15, I'll go with Herbert personally. I think that he does enough to justify that. Let's go now to running back. Who are you eyeing there?
Austin Eckler. This is obviously the game that we talked about probably the most, or at least gave the most weight to. The salary is affordable at 94 because of the value we have, and we don't talk a lot about like the funnel defenses anymore. But Kansas City's 8th against the pass, according to numberFire's adjusted metrics, 23rd against the rush. They're especially giving up work to running backs. They're giving up. I have them 26th in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to running backs. The workload, it's still going to be a little bit like he's not going to have 100% snap rate, but 71% of the snaps in week 6, always a threat to get targets. So even if they fall behind, I'm fine with it. The yardage is partially why we are a little bit low on him, week after week, but we know what Austin Eckler's like top level output is, and he can reach that in this game. So I don't want to overthink it and move away from Eckler. My second love is Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, I think he's the closest running back for me, with Reynolds banged up, to being like the first play that I play at the position. There are some question marks still. They haven't been eager to give him a ton of work, but that's partially because David Montgomery's played so well. And he's had a carrier target on 49.8% of his snaps. That's a pretty phenomenal rate. It's 5th among all running backs, averaging at least 25 snaps per game. So that's going to scale back if he actually has like a 75% snap rate, but it's clear that on a per snap basis, he can get work. So even if he's a little bit limited, it's there. And then my third love is Zach Evans, with the caveat that I'm not going to play him in every single lineup by any means. There's still, again, we're talking question marks, but running back has question marks this week outside of really like Eckler. And I guess it's probably not fair to give Kenneth Walker a question mark, maybe just the salary, but we talked about him plenty by now, I think. But the matchup, Pittsburgh's allowing the 5th highest rushing yards over expectation per carry to back. So it's not as bad as maybe we might think on paper.
Yeah. I think the salary does a lot there, and it's kind of, I don't know.
If he were 58, what percentage of lineups would you have him on?
I'd still probably have him in 15% because he could be the like lead back for a team in a game that's not terrible.
But at 48, you're about 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty substantial then.
Yep, for sure. My top love is Isaiah Pacheco. I really buy into the role change he's had recently just because it's been 3 games where the snaps have been up. In those 3 games, it's 17.3 carries per game, 3.3 targets per game. He's at 106.7 yards from scrimmage per game across those 3. The Chargers rush defense is improved, but definitely not one we need to avoid. So I think that Pacheco at 74 gets me access to a very good game, a very good offense as well, and not the worst salary. I'm willing to buy into what I've seen as far as a change in his role goes. And as a result, I think that Pacheco is going to be a core play for me on Sunday. My second love is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs, similar to you. I just like the way he tends to be used. Now, I do want to be full in practice by Friday because it's a hamstring injury and that does matter. But in the one game we saw Gibbs with no Montgomery, Gibbs had 17 carries, he had 2 targets, and a 50% red zone share. And you mentioned before that the Lions maybe aren't pass heavy. I love that because I want more than 2 targets out of Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think that'd be a beneficial thing for him. And you said that as well in the trend section. So I think that'd be a great thing. Craig Reynolds, he's a solid player. He's dependable, but got a toe and a hamstring injury now. So he's at least banged up. So Gibbs the best option in this backfield. Salary here is $6,200. Last time we saw Jahmyr Gibbs, he's losing snaps to David Montgomery in a standalone game. So I think people will be pretty wary of him, and that makes him a better play to me as well. So Jahmyr Gibbs, all things considered, is going to be a quality play for me in week number 7. I also do have Zach Evans as my third player pick. Again, it really does come down to the fact that like he could get early down work. The Steelers defense, missing Hayward, has struggled against the rush so far this year. So they could be okay on the ground, and like there's a lot of red zone opportunity available here for because Kyren Williams' red zone share was like 97%, not quite, but like it was close. And so if they continue to be a bit run heavy inside the red zone, that'd benefit Zach Evans. So he's flawed. I want to make sure I keep a lid on my roster rate to account for the fact that he's flawed. But even with that said, if it gets me more access to Kelsey, more access to Kupp, more access to Eckler, I really want to be there. So Zach Evans, despite his flaws and despite my reservations, is a player pick for me at $4,800. Wide receiver, who are you turning to there?
I'm going to start off with Puka Nacua with the caveat that Cooper Kupp and Amon-Ra St. Brown easily could have been who I led off with here, but Eckler and Nacua versus like Kupp and
Pacheco would
Pacheco, I guess. Yeah, that's very appealing.
Pacheco.
I think it's.
But like that would be the more different way to go. Would be Eckler and
Yeah.
Nacua. So like I think that's totally fine too.
Either way, Puka Nacua is a good play, and I don't need to.
It's like I'm agreeing with you too much now. But Nick said, my bad. So Nick realizes now that like, just gotta needle you a little bit. But yeah, I feel like I'm being too nice to you now. I'm gonna stop that. Don't worry.
Well, look, I mean, we got what, like 10 more minutes, and then we can go back to hating each other. But
yeah, exactly. Crawl back in our holes. Never talk to you again until next Thursday. Yeah.
Nacua in these 2 games with Kupp, 33% target share, 29% red zone share, 40% end zone target share. They're just clearly it's a 2-player route tree basically. This is like when we said like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf would get like half of the targets for Seattle historically. These guys are getting like
75.
So
38 too. So that's 70. Like that's sick.
So that I want to say like that will scale back, but like will it? I mean, Nacua was so good early on. Kupp has just been a high target share guy always. So we're getting a discount on Nakua's salary because the production has been down, and the touchdowns are expected to scale back, but it's all accounted for here. So I'm really good with it. Second love, again, I saw that you had Tyler Lockett, just as a spoiler alert. So I pivoted to Christian Watson, who I think is a really good play. A little more volatile, but definitely has a ceiling. And receivers just really loaded this week, which is why receiver in the flex is very viable. I think I am kind of leaning toward an Eckler Gibbs start, which then if I don't have
Rosa is upset.
Is that a good thing? Or
I can't tell if that was in favor of Eckler and Gibbs, but it seemed kind of angry. Are you mad?
It did seem all right.
Rosa, you don't want them? She's not looking at me. She's mad. Okay. Confirmed.
But Watson's he's got 2 games. One of them he was limited. Then he was scaled up. His routes were I have the second one, but his routes, so 46% and 84%. So very different there, but 24% target share in week 5, coming off of a bye now. But it's a really, really good matchup against the Broncos. They're allowing a league high catch rate over expectation of plus 11%. And, it's 2 games, I get it, but one of those games was limited, and Watson is 6th among main slate receivers in air yards per game. That's pretty sick for someone who should get a lot of work. I would not be surprised if next week Watson's salary is closer to 76 than 66 because the workload should continue to scale up. There's some risk there because the quarterback play is not necessarily great, even though it started off really, really good, which feels like years ago that Jordan Love was playing really phenomenally. But Watson very much in that conversation in this tier. And then I'm going with Zay Flowers at 63 for my third love. 24% target share in games with Odell Beckham and Mark Andrews both active. 11.7 yard ADOT. 4 downfield targets per game, which for me are 10 plus yards downfield. 27% red zone share, even with share in the field. And the Lions defense letting up a top 6 ADOT to receivers. I know there's wind, but at least the volatility as well. I'm not going to overthink this one just because the wind is up. The salary definitely accounts for what could be maybe a little bit of a downgrade of efficiency on targets.
Yeah. Deacon to the Legend says, gotta trust the bark. Does that mean that we're off Eckler and Cup now? Like, is that, or was it Eckler and Puka? I don't know.
It was
I agree. We have
Eckler
to
and
trust the bark, but
it
I
was
don't know which
starting
direction it
lineups with
goes.
Eckler and Gibbs.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry. 0 Eckler and 0 Gibbs now, Deacon. I think that's the way we got to go. Trusting Rosa, and Rosa we trust. Let's see if she barks for Cooper Cup. Nothing? Cool. Cooper Kupp is my first love at wide receiver. He has had an absurd role, as you highlighted in his first 2 games. 38% target share with 5 deep targets, 3 in the red zone. The Steelers defense hasn't been as elite as usual, so they're playing indoors. It's not a terrible game. I find 0 reasons to not like Cooper Kupp, which again is very weird for me. Tyler Lockett is my number 2 love. $6,800. He has a 22% target share across 5 games so far this year with 35% of the deep targets and 31% inside the red zone. That is phenomenal target shares for Tyler Lockett. They are facing the Cardinals. There's no wind in this game. It's a big implied total. I think Lockett will have a really nice game soon. I also do love DK Metcalf at 77. And I should have said, like, when I was talking about Nakua, like, that's another reason why I might not get there despite liking him, is because Metcalf is there at 77. I like him a bit more, but I don't think the gap between them is that large. So maybe I should be higher on Nakua relative to DK, considering it's a lower salary as well.
Lower salary, and what's more likely, Nakua has like a 20% target share, or JSN gets a little more involved, takes a couple more targets.
Neither. Can I go
Neither?
neither? None of
Sure.
the above. I think DK is more likely to go for like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, but that's because Puka can get 20 targets for
Right.
125 and 2.
Yeah. I think they're both good plays, but I prefer DK by a bit. But I like Lockett more at 68. My third love is Josh Palmer. Didn't talk a ton about him earlier on. I do like Zay Flowers, but I talked about him in the trends. So in the 2 games with no Mike Williams, Palmer has a 25% overall target share with 2.5 deep targets per game. He had 60 plus yards in 3 consecutive games. He has $6,500 in a great game that is great for stacking. I expect the Chargers passing offense to be efficient in this matchup. So I think that Palmer makes a lot of sense at 65. I would also be okay with Rashee Rice at 56, but want to, again, keep the lid on roster rates there. Moving to tight end. What you got there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to back it up for 1 second
Go ahead.
because what I said about having a hard time narrowing down my player pool, looking at all these receivers as we talked about them more, it's going to be really hard to, like,
It's another pitch for having receiver in the flex.
it
The
is.
6,000 range of receiver outside of it like is way better than running back other than Gibbs.
Yeah.
Like so looking at the running backs in the 6,000 range, Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Taylor, Kareem Hunt, Jahmyr Gibbs, Najee Harris, maybe Rashad White, Javonte Williams. I'm probably going to use only Gibbs in that range. Otherwise, it'll be a receiver if I have the option.
And there's like 8 names in the receiver tier at 6,000.
Right.
that I'd
Like,
consider.
let me just like going to the 6,000 range at receiver. I'm not using Drake London. I
Right.
respect myself too much for that. But Lockett, I'm not going to use Gabe outside of game stacks, but I'll use him game stacks. Marquise Brown in game stacks. Christian Watson's a good play. Chris Godwin's a good play. Palmer's a good play. Zay's a good play. Yeah. So like it's a loaded 6,000 range of wide receiver.
Yeah. So I'll talk about tight ends. I think Mark Andrews definitely needs to be some level of prioritized. The salary is accounting for the fact that he hasn't been quite himself. But a 24% target share in his games active with Odell Beckham, 20% of the red zone targets, but 3 downfield targets per game. And a catch rate over expectation of minus 6.6%. So things should get better there. Lions letting up a catch rate over expectation of plus 6.3%, 2 tight ends. And that's with not having to face Travis Kelce in the opener. So could be a get right spot here for Andrews. Second love, Kyle Pitts. I think it's in the conversation here. Buccaneers are one of 6 teams in the NFL with a top 10 adjusted rush defense, according to numberFire, but below average pass defense. Falcons really, really run heavy. I get that, but they probably, they can run into like a wall, but they probably shouldn't. Pitts is at a 19.4% target share and is facing a team that's allowing a top 10 target per route rate to tight ends, which at a certain point does kind of show defensive tendencies, and I think that stands out. So I hope you don't yell at me for that one.
He's also in my loves. It makes me so
Ah,
uncomfortable.
I
But
didn't
he's
actually
also
look
in
at
my
tight
love.
ends for
Yeah. Kyle Pitts is my second love, 56. Like you said, 19% target share, 28% deep target share. If you're looking for a tight end on the slate who can get like yardage, it's him. And like the Bucks defense recently has shown some signs of getting back to being like that Todd Bowles defense that you fear against the run once again. So as uncomfortable as it does make me, I think that Pitts is actually a good play at 56. What could possibly go wrong with both of us having Kyle Pitts as a player love? Oh well. My first love though is Travis Kelce. I do have him there. 85, but like I can get to that salary this week. He's had at least 8 targets in every game he's played so far, which is a 25% target share. His deep target share is only 19%, but it's 26% inside the red zone. And like I at running back, like looking at FanDuel points scored with no touchdowns. I think that's like a great thing to have. It's like I want a good red zone role, but I also want guys who can pay, at least not kill me, even if they don't score a touchdown. Kelce last week, 16.9 FanDuel points with no touchdowns. Bananas. It's absurd for a tight end. Facing the Chargers here, I think that like he's in that Eckler Cup discussion, Keenan Allen discussion of like, who do I prioritize? You give me one lineup for Sunday, it's probably going to be Kelce at tight end, unless I get wind relief in Baltimore and I can go Lamar Andrews. I think it might be Kelce at tight end for me in that one lineup.
let's say 10 might be a little too hard to answer this question fully. So let's say 100. What's your like tight end distribution between Kelsey, Andrews? You can throw in like Laporte, like who, however you're viewing it. Like, are you
30
like
Kelce, well, 35 Kelce, 25 Andrews, and then other 40 are just like whatever game I'm stacking, just
okay? Yeah.
toss in like Pitts will be in there outside of the game stacks, but like
So that's how heavy, like over half your lineups, you think will have Kelsey
one
and
of those
Andrews.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I would like that to be the case. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that one because
Mhm.
they're sort of always obvious plays, but this week I think we have the salary to get there
I agree.
without really having to scrounge a tight end, which is very easy to do because it's a lot of scrounging if you're not playing this guys.
Right. But I think the good options there are actually in good enough spots to justify going to them this week. Defense, what you got there?
I like your defense more, but I'm gonna go with the Commanders. 46. It's a lot higher than we typically go to, but again, we're gonna have a couple extra salary cap points to play with this week, and using that for an upside defense is logical. 3 games with at least 10 FanDuel points. But they can kind of have those havoc plays. They're 11th in pressure rate. The Giants' offensive line is the second worst pass blocking matchup of the week, according to Pro Football Focus, based on current health. And either way, I'm not fearing the quarterback here. So it's not a 5,000 level defense, but Washington 46 makes sense to me.
Yeah, I like the other side of that game too, which is the Giants. The Giants' salary is pretty low, and I like Sam Howell. I think he's a fun player, but he loves to take sacks, and that's on him. It's not on the offense, not on the offensive line. It's on him. That's his fault. But the Giants' defense is $3,400, and they've got some dudes along the defensive line who can potentially get to Howell. They faced a lot of pretty good defense or offenses so far. So the fact they haven't been good, I don't think is totally on them. Like they faced the Bills, the Dolphins, Seahawks, 49ers. And before that, it was the Cardinals and the Cowboys. But like recently, a lot of really tough offenses. Commanders are not that, and they have a lot of drop back volume, which is good for opposing defense scoring. So $3,400 to the Giants, very, very fun for this week. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for week number 7?
I think we covered it. Talked about like those other games that might have some appeal, but it's really taking shape. I think we'll learn a little bit more with injuries by Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We do a podcast Thursday morning. We get 1 day of practice. It's not necessarily indicative. Last week, like things really changed in terms of running back plays. So you got to stay plugged in, watch the weather, watch the injury report. And yeah, I think those are going to be crucial this week.
One note is that Deshaun Watson's apparently practicing today. So maybe he plays, maybe that ups the appeal in that game, but Cooper.
Any Colts?
No.
And so then
it would be like maybe Jerome Ford is more in play, or maybe Amari Cooper is more in play, but it's a maybe.
And we already have a lot of receivers.
Yeah. I think the big things to monitor for the final couple days are Craig Reynolds' health, Jahmyr Gibbs' health, see if he gets in a full practice at some point this week, and then see if we get more reporting on the Rams' backfield. Those are the kind of key things that I'll keep my eye on as
if Gibbs is still limited, for example, on Friday,
it's tough.
Right. Like we're assuming he's going to be full, but like there's one of those things that changes the whole conversation around Gibbs if he's like.
Yeah, that would hurt. I would downgrade him. I would still use him, but I'd downgrade him.
Right. Okay.
That is all we have here for today. Do not forget the free play over at FanDuel Research. Go to FanDuel.com/research to get yourself entered there with no entry fee. And again, don't forget to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get these podcasts as they go live. If you like what you hear, for some reason, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. Don't forget, we are live here every Monday and Thursday on the FanDuel YouTube page. Recap show Monday, preview show Thursday, 10 a.m. for both days, and also over on FanDuel TV Plus. Brandon, people have questions for you on Twitter. Where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. I'm also on Threads at Jim.Sannes. If you're over on Threads, feel free to give a follow over there as well. You can follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups across week number 7. We'll talk to you once again Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.